Hey, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be watching this. My name is Karen Turner. I am a senior executive, leadership excellence executive coach. And here on this podcast, Leadership Untitled, we talk about how to refine our leadership skills, gain momentum in our careers, navigate corporate politics, and how to discover the joy and confidence that we can feel when we are giving our best at work and how that feeling manifests in other areas of our lives. Welcome. As you are joining, I've got my comments over here. As you are joining in, please feel free to comment, say a good morning, say hello, because this is the inaugural episode of Leadership Untitled. And I am incredibly excited, thrilled, proud, all of the words, all of the feelings, nervous, that's part of it too, to be launching a podcast. So that's what makes today even more special, is that this is episode 1 of Leadership Untitled. It has felt. Good morning, Shakira. Thank you for being here. Good morning. Good morning. Let's go ahead and talk about why this feels like a birth of sorts. I have thought about this podcast idea, thought about stepping into this space of talking about race in corporate America for years now. And I have never added my voice to the public discourse of what is happening because of a couple of different reasons. But at the end of the day, where I felt my work had the most influence, or um, my standing, for lack of a better word, my standing in corporate America, I felt was the strongest in terms of showing up and using my influence on the front lines. So having meaningful conversations with colleagues, ensuring diverse hiring practices, ensuring inclusive workplace, because truly what we talk about here in the public space doesn't mean anything unless we are able to translate that into our day-to-day work. And so now, for over a decade, which is incredible to think about, working on 2 decades, I have been in that leadership space and seeing what it is to be boots on the ground as a Black woman in corporate America, helping to advance that voice for other Black women, women of color, truthfully, people of color, and being an advocate for ensuring that we are all welcome. Thanks, Shakira. Ensuring that we are all welcome and have a place at the table, whatever that table looks like. Well, often when we refer to the table, we talk about leadership. But when we think about inclusivity, when we talk about equity, the table truly is for everyone. It's not just the conference table, although that will be a lot of what we're talking about. But I think about how I have led some of in my career in healthcare and hospital. My focus has been in clinical nutrition and food services. And food service team members are often unheard. And so having that perspective of what that table looks like to expand to expand and ensure that their voices are heard, has been part of what my career has been about. But now, as I said, approaching those 20 years of being in a leadership space, being in the leadership space, boots on the ground, I can no longer ignore that voice that's telling me that there is more. The work that I am doing, continue to do, is important. How I show up is important. But fulfilling this part of me is also key. And also, it has just never gone away. It has been a voice that has been in the back of my mind consistently. I'm sure if you were to look up my names, you might even look up my name. You might even find some websites where I have started the conversation and said that's the conversation I wanted to start, but then I have pulled back, and here's why. A couple of different reasons. It's scary. talking about race in America, especially right now. Right now is an incredible time because there is more conversation, but because there is more conversation, there's often more polarization. So it's scary. It's scary to be vulnerable and to sometimes feel that this conversation is about justifying just my very being and who I am. And putting myself out there in such a vulnerable way has always intimidated me. But I know better now because when we don't have these conversations about race, when we don't talk about things that are red flags that raise an eyebrow that we talk about in private circles, when we don't bring those conversations to the forefront, then you when you don't bring those conversations to the forefront, then you are allowing it to exist. You're allowing it to fester. And when we don't have these conversations about leadership and representation and the fact that as my career has grown, the fact that as I have increased my titles, that there has been less and less of people who look like me, women who look like me. And so I have to speak out because it is our responsibility to say something and that I know better. So, despite the fact that it's a little bit intimidating, it's a little bit scary, I have to speak out. The other reason why I have been hesitant to discuss these issues publicly as well and truly launch into this space has been the danger to my career. All of this sounds incredibly selfish, but these are the reasons why. And as we start this conversation, it is about being authentic and understanding the full story, the full picture. So I have been concerned about my career and the fact that as I have wanted to grow, as I have wanted to see more for myself and gain being ambitious, I felt that having conversations about race, about my stories, highlighting other women, other people of color, and their stories, how that may have a negative perception on me. And that if someone were to, because we've all been warned, watch out what you put on social media, as we, as I think about those comments and think about, well, what will happen if I happen to be looking for a job or looking for a promotion, even within my organization, and someone types my name up and they see that I'm having these conversations, what will happen? Will I be perceived as trouble? Will I be perceived as the angry Black woman? Which we will talk about all of those stereotypes in later episodes. But that certainly was a reason why I have held back. And of course, now I know better. Here's the thing, a corporate relationship, a work relationship is a two-way street. And if there is an employer who, seeing my respectful, meaningful conversation, seeing that I have authenticity, vulnerability, that the guests that I have on are also sharing their experience and talking about how we can move this space forward, how we can solve the issues that are um, diversity, inclusion, and equity. If you type in my name and you see this work and it's a no for you, that's great because it's probably also going to be a no for me too. It is a two-way street. And it's important that we understand the power that we all have to make change. Because again, when we remain silent, when we don't talk about it, the stats continue to be as dismal as they are, where we have 3% of women of color. That's all women of color in a 22 million workforce, in a 22 million corporate workforce, where we have 3% of women of color who are in C-suite positions, where we have 18 percent of women of color who are in senior vice president roles, so senior executive roles. And when we break that down to Black women, less than 1% or less than 2% of Black women are in C-suite roles. Those stats continue to exist and they continue to get dismal because no one talks about it, because it is considered taboo. So that's part of what changed my story The reason why is that voice in my head that said, I have to keep going. I have to share my story. I have to be a place for others to feel comfortable to share their story. I have also been incredibly inspired by the growing conversations, the growing discourse around race in corporate America, around the world. I say America because that's the phrase that I'm familiar with. But as we talk about inclusion, I know this is not something, unfortunately, that exists only in the United States. So when we talk about corporate, it is present in other areas as well around the world. But I have been so impressed, so inspired by the voices, by the Black women who I have seen stepping up, whether this is a job that they're doing full time as an entrepreneur, whether it is the women who are in senior executive roles lending their voice to this space. It has been inspiring. And there are too many women to speak and name right now. And I would feel terrible if I forgot one of their names. So here's your first call to action. If you are not yet following me or connected with me on LinkedIn, please feel free to do that. It is my name, Karen Turner, Karen Cherie Turner, Karen, Kareen. Maybe one day I'll share that story as well. But Karen Cherie Turner, follow me, connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can see the people who I'm engaging with, the comments that I'm leaving on different posts, to see the leaders, the thought leaders who I am following, because it has been inspiring to see those voices. Because as we reach out to each other, as we reach down, reach up, reach across, um, all of us benefit. I'm never been one for being super good with quotes, but I know this one for sure, that a rising tide lifts all boats. The other reason that I have decided to make this step into this space, regardless of what my feelings are, is in addition to being a senior executive leader, being an executive coach, I'm a mama. I am a mom to two beautiful, brilliant girls who are funny, who challenge me, who are adventurous. They are, at the time of this recording, 3.5 years old and 6 years old, and they are already exhibiting those leadership traits. And in our house, we never say the word bossy. We are leaders here. And as my husband and I nurture these traits in our girls, I would be remiss if I was not sharing my voice in this space. If I'm telling them and teaching them to show up as they are, to never let a to rise above their feelings of fear, to rise above their nervousness, then I am not being fully honest and transparent with them. I want to be that example that they can see, that despite something being uncomfortable, despite having conversations that may cause other people to rear up, that it is important that they show up as who they are and that they use their voice in the way that feels authentic to them. And if they're not seeing me do it, then that's a problem. So that's the other inspiration, is that I want to be an example to them. Even more than that, I want to be sure that as they grow up, that they have choice, that they can choose their own career trajectory, whether that is whatever they want to be, whether it is in fashion, ballet dancers, that's what we have right now, whether it is moving into leadership as I have done, whether it is entrepreneurship as their father. I want them to know that they have a choice. I've shared this in previous videos before, but it is okay to say that I want to work in corporate. It is okay for you to say that my goal is to see and to achieve the highest levels that I can within the corporate world. And that if you can't, that the only other option is to be an entrepreneur, or to stay in your current position, or to move from company to company to company, but only remaining at lateral moves. it is okay for us to have these conversations and not just say, well, you can always start your own business, because not everyone wants to do that. Not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And so how do we have conversations that ensure that we all have the choices and the opportunity to move forward in a way that fulfills us, that fulfills whatever that ambition is in you, without having to leave corporate, or without having to move necessarily around the world or around the country. And we'll talk about that as well. So those are the reasons why I can no longer remain silent, why I am not going to remain silent, and why I want to be here. And so I am here. This is the first episode, as I said, of Leadership Untitled. And here we are going to talk about race in corporate America. Leadership Untitled will unabashedly celebrate the insightful, influential, and resilient leadership that Black women and women of color bring to the table. So who should listen? You. If you are here, if you are listening, if you are tuning in whenever you are listening to this first episode, you are supposed to be here. So I will be focusing on a very specific story and experience, because that voice needs to be heard. But we all intersect. We are all interconnected. And so, as I mentioned, when we ensure that the underrepresented, the misrepresented are represented authentically, correctly, truthfully, again, that rising tide lifts all boats. And that is why I am here, is to have these crucial conversations. And so regardless of your race, regardless of where you work, regardless of what it is that you do, if you find value, if you want to join this meaningful and respectful conversation, I absolutely welcome you, because the work can't just be done by people who look like me. And in fact, it can't be done by people who look like me. It needs to have other faces, other races, other voices as part of that journey to truly have meaningful change. So you'll hear from me as we jump into this podcast. You're going to hear from me. You're going to hear about my story, my experiences, but I also look forward to bringing on guests who are going to share their expertise, who are going to, again, help us towards gaining momentum in our career, refining our leadership skills, navigating corporate politics, helping us to discover the joy and confidence that comes from living in our fullness, and how that manifests itself in other areas of our lives. I am so excited. I cannot wait to dig in, to jump in, to have these conversations, to hear from you. And so if you are looking and thinking, how can I help this podcast grow? Share it with a friend, share it with 2 friends, share it with 3 friends, share it freely. This podcast will be available for you to watch right here on LinkedIn. If you're joining live, again, thank you for being here. It will be available for you here. It will also be available wherever you listen to podcasts as well. And I'm excited for this journey. I'm excited to get to know all of you as well, each and every one of you, because all of our stories, as I said, intersect, and it is how all of our voices coming together, that is how we will make the change that we know is required. So I look forward to next week, same time, same place, Wednesday, 7:30 in the morning. I look forward to seeing you here. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.